What's up, everybody? Back with another edition of Everyday Hoops. Hope you guys are having a good one. Today, we are going to be doing another Remember When. You know, I've done a multiple amount of videos like this, Remember When, just going back in the last few years of NBA history, and remembering teams or things out, you know, maybe could have got lost, you know, that just looking back in memory lane because of the offseason and stuff like that. But today is going to be different from the other videos. Today we're going to be looking at the Western Conference in 2014 because it was honestly insane and one of the most stacked and craziest conferences we've seen in the last few seasons. We're going to get all into that today. Thank you guys for views on the videos and the shorts recently. Really appreciate it. If you like the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications, all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. That's a lot. And this might be a long one, so I don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. So to start off with this 2014 Western Conference, I'm going to give you a little synopsis of every Western Conference team so far going into the 2013-14 season. And yeah, just see what every team was at, you know, because again, this was dang near 10 years ago, which is honestly pretty crazy to think about. So I'll give you a real refresh of what every team was looking like. By the way, I got a lot of these from a Bleacher Report article that I saw that was predicting every team record in the 2014 year, so that's where a lot of this is going to come from, of these expectations and stuff. But I also saw a few more things, but this is what the expectations were. We'll start with the Northwest Division, starting with the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are coming off the 2013 season where they were great, finishing with 57 wins, one of their best seasons in franchise history. But fortunately, they lost in the first round to the Golden State Warriors. In their offseason, they traded away their star acquisition Andre Iguodala after just 1 year, sending him to the Golden State Warriors. Also, Corey Brewer, a big part of that team, would leave as well. And for agency, they signed guys like Jay Hickson and Nate Robinson. And they also brought in a new coach, Brian Shaw. They also were not going to have Danilo Gallinari, who suffered a torn ACL. But for the Denver Nuggets, they're projected to be still a very solid team, and Bleacher Report had them to win 49 games. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, they finished 2013 with a 31-51 record, being the same old Minnesota Timberwolves. They lost out on Andre Iguodala and Luke Rittenauer, but in free agency they made some moves, signing Kevin Martin and Corey Brewer to deals, and they also traded for Shabazz Muhammad on draft day, while still having guys like Kevin Love, young Ricky Rubio, JJ Barea, Nikola Pekovic. This was still a very decent team, along with Derek Williams, who was just the number 2 overall pick 2 years ago. The Minnesota Timberwolves were still young, still up and coming, but had a lot of expectations a little bit from some other teams. Not saying they were going to be a automatic playoff team, but a lot of people were expecting the Minnesota Timberwolves to be a lot better this year, and Bleacher Report had them expected to win 45 games. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're coming off a 2013 season when they finished with 60 wins, one of their best seasons in franchise history, coming off the year prior to that where they were in the NBA Finals. And now, with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, obviously, this Thunder team is expected to do great things, along with guys like Serge Ibaka, Reggie Jackson, Jeremy Lamb, Kendrick Perkins, and guys like that. In the offseason, they drafted Steven Adams in the first round of the 2013 NBA draft. They lost out on Kevin Martin, who was a big scoring punch, but the Thunder still had a very capable team, and Bleacher Report expected them to win 57 games. The Portland Trail Blazers came off a 2013 season where they finished with 33 wins. Not a great season for Portland. In the offseason, they made some moves. They lost out on JJ Hickson, but they made a lot more acquisitions, bringing in Robin Lopez, Thomas Robinson, who's the number 5 overall pick the year prior, and Darrell Wright, a veteran wing, while also drafting CJ McCollum in the lottery of the 2013 draft, while still having a 28-year-old Marcus Aldridge, still having Nick Batum, Damian Lillard, who was their 6th overall pick 2 years ago, projecting to be very good, while still having guys like Wesley Matthews, Mo Williams. The Blazers still had a very solid team. Of course, though a lot of people didn't expect them to take a huge jump, Bleacher Report expected them to be a 41-41 team. Pretty average. The Utah Jazz are coming off a 2013 season when they finished with 43 wins and did not make the playoffs. Very tough way for the Jazz to go out, and they kind of went to rebuild, losing out on Al Jefferson and Paul Millsap, as both of them left Utah, 2 of their star players, and it looked like it was rebuild time in Utah. They traded for Trey Burke on draft night, and this Jazz team was definitely going into another direction. They still had a 23-year-old Gordon Hayward, 22-year-olds in Alec Burks, Derek Favors, 21-year-old Enes Kanter. They had a very young team, and the Jazz were embracing the rebuild, and everyone knew it. They're expected to win 23 games this year. Going to the Pacific Division, the Golden State Warriors are coming off 2013 when they finished 47-35 and made it to the second round, losing to the San Antonio Spurs. But this team was up and coming. Steph Curry made a big name for himself in 2013. Guys like Klay Thompson, David Lee, Harrison Barnes were very big parts of this team as well. In free agency, they lost out on vets like Richard Jefferson and Jarrett Jack, but they brought in Maurice Spates and made a big move acquiring Andre Iguodala from the Denver Nuggets, who expected to do big things for the Warriors. The Warriors were a very nice, young, up-and-coming team, and they're expected to win 51 games. The LA Clippers, after acquiring Chris Paul a few years ago, they finished 2013 with a 56-26 record, but unfortunately were upset in the first round by the Memphis Grizzlies in 6 games. They brought in Doc Rivers as their new head coach, who expected to do big things and change stuff around. Even though they lost out on guys like Chauncey Billups, Caron Butler, and Eric Bledsoe free agency, they stocked up, bringing in J.J. Redick, Darren Collison, and Jared Dudley. People were expecting the Clippers. This could potentially be the year that Lob City to come in and win a championship, with still having Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Jamal Crawford, Matt Barnes. Just had a really good overall team, and now bringing in an experienced head coach in Doc Rivers, and bringing in some guys like J.J. Redick that will really help round out this team. They're expected to win 53 games. The LA Lakers are coming off of 2013 where they finished 45-37 and got swept in the first round by the San Antonio Spurs. They were supposed to be a new super team that they had Dwight Howard, Kobe Bryant, Steve Nash, Pau Gasol, Metta World Peace, and all this stuff like that, but unfortunately they really disappointed and eventually lost out on Dwight Howard and Metta World Peace, both leaving in free agency. They tried to fix that, acquiring Nick Young, Wesley Johnson, and Chris Kaman. But the Lakers are in a tough spot, especially after Kobe Bryant was not going to be able to play the start of the season because of the torn ACL he suffered the year prior. But they still expected the Lakers to hold it down, at least somewhat, until Bryant got back, as they were expected to win 44 games. The Phoenix Suns coming off 2013, where they finished 25-57. They brought in Jeff Hornacek to be their new head coach. Free agency, they lost out on vets like Jared Dudley and Luis Scola. They drafted Alex Len with a top pick in the 2013 draft, and they acquired Eric Bledsoe and Caron Butler, both from the LA Clippers, that expected to make some changes in Phoenix, but a lot of people still did not expect anything for the Phoenix Suns because it was the Phoenix Suns. They were coming off the Steve Nash, the Stoudemire era. They're still looking to rebuild. Didn't have a lot of great things to look forward to. I mean, they did have a young guy in Dragic. They had Eric Bledsoe, Marcus Morris. They had a decent young team, but no expectations there, as the Bleacher Report projected the Suns to win 19 games. The Sacramento Kings are coming off 2013 when they finished 28-54. In the offseason, they lost out on their former Rookie of the Year, Tyreke Evans. They also brought a new coach in Michael Malone, and they made a lot of moves in free agency, acquiring Carl Landry, Luka Mbamute, and Gravis Vasquez, while also drafting Ben McLemore with a top pick in 2013. But, of course, people still expected the Kings to be the Kings, even though they did have a decent team. DeMarcus Cousins was now a year older, Isaiah Thomas, Rudy Gay. They still had a very solid team, and Bleacher Report projected them to win 34 games. In the Southwest Division, the Dallas Mavericks, they finished 2013 41-41. After winning a championship just a few years ago, the Mavericks are slowly losing players from that team, and players are getting older. In the offseason, they lost Darren Collison and OJ Mayo, and they try to make it up, giving out a lot of contracts. They brought in Monte Ellis, Devin Harris, Jose Calderon, Samuel Dalembert, and DeJuan Blair. They had a 35-year-old Dirk, who was not getting any younger, a 35-year-old Shawn Marion, and a 37-year-old Vince Carter. The championship window for this team, or even the playoff window for this team, was really dying down. The Mavericks are trying to do everything they can to salvage it. Bleacher Report did not really believe in them, and they're projected to win 38 games. The Houston Rockets finished 2013 winning 45 games and losing the first round to the Oklahoma City Thunder after James Harden was acquired the year prior and became an all-star for them. They still had a lot of solid young pieces like Chandler Parsons, Jeremy Lin, Terrence Jones, Patrick Beverley, and in the offseason they made a huge move to sign Dwight Howard, looking to bring the Rockets team to the next level. Bleacher Report projected them to win 50 games. Memphis Grizzlies going off 2013 season was one of their best ever. They finished with 56 wins, one of their most in franchise history at that point, and made it all the way to the conference finals where they lost to the Spurs in 6 games. They brought a new head coach, taking out Lionel Hollins and bringing in Dave Yeager. And frankly, they didn't really do much. They acquired Costa Koufos and Mike Miller, lost down Darrell Arthur, not really anything big, but still having the core of the grit and grind together. Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, and Tony Allen. People expected this team to still be in that contention, and they're projected to win 52 games. The New Orleans Pelicans, which was actually this is the first year in franchise history that they were named the Pelicans, finished 2013 with 27 wins. They still had some very young pieces on this team, but wanted to project it a little bit higher because this was a new team, new branding, new everything. They want to bring some excitement, and they made a big move acquiring former All-Star Jrue Holiday from the Philadelphia 76ers, also bringing Tyreke Evans from the Kings. They lost on Robin Lopez and Graves Vasquez, but still bring those two in along with with their number 1 overall pick they had a few years ago, Anthony Davis, while still having guys like Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, Austin Rivers. The Pelicans are expected to be a little bit better this year, as Bleacher Report projecting them to win 39 games. And finally, the San Antonio Spurs, coming off of 2013 when they finished 58-24 and went all the way to the NBA Finals where they were just 1 game away from winning it, but eventually lost to the Heat in 7 games. And for AG, the only move was acquiring Marco Bellinelli, losing out on Gary Neal, but the Spurs were still the Spurs. I mean, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili were all older at this point, as Duncan was 37, Ginobili was 36, and Parker was 31. They still had guys like Boris Diaw, Patty Mills, Danny Green, Thiago Splitter, a 22-year-old Kawhi Leonard. The Spurs team was not to be taken lightly at all, and they're projected to win 55 games. So after that little synopsis, taking that Bleacher Report article and projecting the wins, this is what the projected Western Conference standing was, according to this one Bleacher Report article, obviously. Maybe not for everybody, but this is just kind of the feel for what the NBA was going to be like in 2014, specifically the Western Conference. So projecting the West, the Thunder were projected as number 1, while the Spurs at 2, Clippers 3, Grizzlies 4, Warriors 5, Rockets at 6, the Nuggets and Timberwolves to round out the playoffs, the Lakers and Blazers just missing it, then with the Pelicans, Mavericks, Kings, Jazz, and Suns to be on the bottom. But still, even look at the projections. I mean, 6 teams winning 50 games in a conference is really, really crazy. So I feel like coming into the season, everyone already knew this Western Conference was going to be definitely loaded up. We're going to skip to 1 month into the season. At the end of November, this is what the Western Conference is looking like. The Spurs were the best team in the West throughout the first month, finishing at 14-3, while the Portland Trailblazers were really coming into their own, going 13-3, with LaMarcus Aldridge and Damian Lillard becoming a great duo. The Thunder at 11-3 were still really good. The Rockets at 13-5 were really solid, starting off with this new Dwight Howard era. The Clippers were at 12-5, having the Nuggets at 9-6. The Mavericks at 10-8 were very nice as well. The Warriors, Suns, and Lakers are all 9-8 at 8, 9, and 10. The Wolves were 9-9. Grizzlies at 8-8. The Pelicans at 7-8, and then took a big drop off. And then the Kings and the Jazz at the bottom. The Kings at 4-10, and the Jazz at 3-15 to start the season. Of course, there was only 1 month into the season, so we gotta take this with a grain of salt, obviously. But there's definitely some teams that are projected to do good things that were doing good. Teams like the Spurs, the Thunder, the Rockets, the Clippers, and stuff like that. But also some surprise teams like the Portland Trailblazers and Phoenix Suns being in the playoff race 1 month into the season. Next, we're going to skip to January 1st. Again, this probably is going to be as in-depth as my previous ones until we get to the end, because it's an 82-game season, and if I try to kind of really analyze an 82-game season, we're going to be here for 3 hours. So we're going to skip around a little bit, but promise you we're going to get into it. We're going to go till January 1st, 2014, the start of the new year. This is what the Western Conference looked like. Still very, very good. The Thunder were on top of the West at 25-6, one of the best records in the league, and Kevin Durant was having a phenomenal season, along with guys like Russell Westbrook. Thunder are really taking over. Then the Portland Trailblazers in there at 25-7, being one of the best offenses in the league. LaMarcus Aldridge, Damian Lillard take a huge step in his sophomore season, and they were looking really good. Spurs are also 25-7, being the San Antonio Spurs, playing some amazing. Even though their star players are getting a lot older, a lot of the young guys were stepping up and taking some spots, and they look really good. The Clippers are 4th at 21-12, playing very solid. The Suns were the surprise of the league at this point, 19-11. They're already won as many games through the first 2.5 months of the season than they were projected to win for the entire season. Coming into the season, the Suns were projected to win 19 games by Bleacher Report, and they already were at 19 by January. The Suns were doing amazing. Goran Dragic really came up out of nowhere and was looking really good. Eric Bledsoe looked like a big part of this team. Joe Green, the Morris twins, PJ Tucker, just so many unexpected guys you wouldn't think of really coming together well, and there was a fun, exciting thing going on in Phoenix. Rockets were at 6 at 21-13. The Warriors were 7 at 20-13. The Mavericks were at 18-13. Then after that, the Timberwolves were 15-16. The Pelicans were 14-15. The Nuggets were 14-16. The Grizzlies were 13-17. Not a great start to this team that was just in the conference finals the year prior. Of course, not anything to panic about, obviously, because we still had 3.5 months left to bring it back. But the Grizzlies being here at this point wasn't a great look. Then you had the Lakers at 13-19, the Kings at 10-20, and then the Utah Jazz were 10-24. So looking at the standings, obviously has some surprises like the Suns, the Blazers, the Grizzlies being a disappointment. But this was shaping up to be a great Western Conference. I mean, look at the top of the West. I mean, 3 teams with single-digit losses going into January. I mean, this Western Conference is going to come down to it. Next, we're going to fast forward to the NBA AllStar Break. This is where we're going to get a little more in depth of some teams. So looking at the standings in the Western Conference by the AllStar Break, at number 1, we had the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are 43-12. Kevin Durant was having an MVP-like season. This Thunder team was really clicking on all cylinders. Their role players, guys like Serge Ibaka, Kendrick Perkins, Jeremy Lamb, and them, Reggie Jackson, were really stepping up huge for this team. And the Thunder were looking like they're on pace to make another deep playoff run, another finals appearance potentially. At number 2, we had the San Antonio Spurs at 38-15. The Spurs just being the Spurs, you know, even though, again, guys like Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili weren't really producing as much as they had the last few years, their presence was still felt. Guys like Kawhi Leonard were taking a big step, and the Spurs team was playing just all around Spurs basketball. At number 3, we had the Portland Trailblazers at 36-17. Again, they were taking a big jump. Damian Lillard took a huge jump. Him and LaMarcus became a really good duo, while guys like Wesley Matthews, Nick Batum, Robin Lopez were doing the little things that they needed to do. And this Blazer team was looking like an actual force. I mean, they weren't projected to be anything great, but they weren't projected to be bad either. They're projected to be kind of like just an okay mid-team, maybe sneak into the playoffs at 8 or 7. But this Blazer team looked a whole lot better than that, because a big part, the Damian Lillard jump. And before we had the Houston Rockets, who were also 36-17. James Harden was playing an all-star again. Dwight Howard was coming in and was looking very solid with this team. Chandler Parsons took a big jump as well for the Rockets this season. And they were a very fun team to watch. At number 5, we had the LA Clippers at 37-18. The Clippers are still playing like the Clippers. Lob City, fun games. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin were having amazing seasons. The role players are really stepping up. Doc Rivers was going to be the guy to kind of bring this Clipper team to the next level. And it looked like they're going to hit that next level as just being a really, really consistently good team. But of course, a lot of eyes are going to be on the NBA playoffs for them. At number 6, had the Dallas Mavericks at 32-22. Mavericks were kind of surprised by this point as well. I mean, they were kind of a team that was just fumbling to try and have any success or any similar to success to what they had a few years ago. And it was honestly kind of working. Monte Ellis was playing really good. Dirk, even though he's 35, was still being Dirk Nowitzki. Vince Carter, Jose Calderon. This was a very much older team. A lot of their main guys were in their mid-30s, beside Monte Ellis. But this team was really clicking together. And the Mavericks were a team that was definitely surprising to people and could make some noise in the playoffs. At 7, you had the Phoenix Suns at 30-21. Again, kind of the surprise of the NBA at this point. 30 wins at the AllStar Break, the 7th seed in the Western Conference. Goran Dragic was in conversation for most improved player. And everything for the Suns was really just working super well. They're a very fun team to watch, very young team. Players that didn't really have a lot of experience at this position, that were just coming in and, you know, defying expectations. At 8, you had the Golden State Warriors at 31-22. Still being very solid. Steph Curry really solidified himself this season as an all-star caliber player. Klay Thompson was playing really good. Andre Iguodala is definitely making a difference, bringing a veteran type all-star type leadership to this team. David Lee and Harrison Barnes are really good as well, and this Warriors team was not one to play around with. At 9, you had the Memphis Grizzlies at 29-23. After a pretty bad start, the Grizzlies brought it back together. Mike Conley, Marcus Gasol, Zach Randolph, were doing their thing. The defense was really locking in. It took them a little while to kind of adjust to a new head coach in Dave Yeager. Gotta remember that. But the Grizzlies were now starting to go back to their ways. Then after that, you had the Minnesota Timberwolves at number 10 at 25-28. The Nuggets at 11 at 24-27. The Pelicans at 12 at 23-29. The Jazz at 13 at 19-33. The Kings at 14 at 18-35. And the Lakers at 15 also at 18-35. Next, we're going to jump forward to March 20th, 2014. And from this point on, we're going to go really in depth because this is the key parts of the season. So let's give you what the standings were by March 20th, 2014. The San Antonio Spurs were now the #1 seed in the Western Conference at 51-16, looking ferocious. Obviously, the San Antonio Spurs. At number 2, you have the Oklahoma City Thunder at 50-18. Kevin Durant was the favorite to win MVP. Russell Westbrook was back and playing really well, and the Thunder were really clicking on all cylinders. At 3, you had the LA Clippers at 48-21, playing really good. The Lob City was in full effect, and this Clipper team was definitely not to be taken lightly. At 4, you had the Houston Rockets at 46-22. James Harden and Dwight Howard actually looking pretty solid. With some key contributors like Chandler Parsons and Patrick Beverley really bringing a lot to this team. The Rockets were a very interesting one. The Blazers were at 5 at 45-24. Still looking really, really good with LaMarcus and Dame. And they were definitely a wild card in there. At 6, you had the Golden State Warriors at 44-26. A team that was definitely taking big steps. Steph Curry was playing really good. Andre Iguodala, Klay Thompson, David Lee, just having a really good year. At 7, you had the Memphis Grizzlies at 40-27. Coming off that bad start, they really were locking teams down, obviously, as well. At 8, you had the Dallas Mavericks at 41-28. Dirk leading this team to the playoffs once more would be amazing at 35 years old, especially where they weren't really projected to be that great of a team. At 9, you had the Phoenix Suns at 39-29. Suns vying for a playoff spot at this point in March seemed like a fever dream to everybody. This was very, very unexpected, and they were playing really good. And honestly, a lot of people were rooting for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, the Suns haven't had this much success in a few years, especially this much unexpected success. At 10, you had the Minnesota Timberwolves at 34-33, still trying to fight for a playoff spot. Kevin Love was trying everything he could to get that Timberwolves team into the playoffs. At 11, you had the Denver Nuggets at 31-37, definitely being a little more disappointing than what we thought. We kind of give the Nuggets a benefit of the doubt because they're still the Nuggets, they still had a solid team, but at this point, the Nuggets were just, not really clicking, not playing that well. At 12, you had the Orleans Pelicans at 27-40, another team that kind of disappointing a little bit. I mean, you didn't expect them to be a top 5 seed or anything, but at least expect them to be a little more competitive, and they're in there. And then the last 3 seeds in the West were already eliminated at this point. The Kings at 24-44, the Lakers at 22-45, and the Jazz at 22-47. All already eliminated out of playoff contention because that's how good the Western Conference was. Now, this was the standings at this point, March 20th, and now we're going to go almost day by day and see what things change. Then we go to March 22nd, a big day as well, where the Blazers would lose to the Bobcats, the Rockets would beat the Cavaliers, the Grizzlies, Pelicans, Spurs, and Clippers will also all win games. This was significant because the San Antonio Spurs, with their win over the Golden State Warriors, would clinch their playoff berth at 53-16, being the first team in the West to clinch a playoff spot. Going a few days later to March 24th, on that day the Rockets would beat the Bobcats, the Suns would beat the Hawks, the Blazers would lose to the Miami Heat, the Grizzlies would beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in a big game, the Pelicans would beat the Nets in overtime, the Thunder and Spurs would both get blowout wins, and the Clippers would beat the Bucks. The standings were still very, very similar. The Suns were now the 8th seed in the West after their win over the Hawks. The Mavericks would drop down to 9, the Grizzlies still at 7, but this would eliminate the New Orleans Pelicans from contention, as even though they did win and they were 30-40, they now have the tiebreaker over either the Grizzlies or the Mavericks, so they would be eliminated from playoff contention, leaving only 11. Going to another few days later, the Suns would beat the Wizards, the Wolves would beat the Hawks, the Pelicans would beat the Clippers, and a big loss for them. The Spurs would beat the Nuggets, and the Grizzlies would beat the Jazz on March 26, 2014. And with the Nuggets losing to the Spurs and with the Suns winning as well, the Nuggets would be eliminated from playoff contention at 32-40, leaving just 10 games. The next day was a big day as well. March 27th, only 3 games that mattered in the Western Conference. The Blazers would beat the Hawks by 15, the Rockets would blow out the 76ers, and the Clippers would beat the Mavericks, which is a big game because with the Mavericks losing to the Clippers 109-103, this would give the Oklahoma City Thunder a playoff spot, meaning 2 teams now in the Western Conference clinch a playoff spot at this point. Later, on March 29th, the Clippers would beat the Rockets 118-107, the Mavericks would beat the Kings in a close one, the Spurs would blow out the Pelicans. And this was a big day because with the Clippers winning that game over the Rockets, they would officially clinch a playoff spot at 52-22. Now you have 3 teams in the West that would clinch. Now we're going to go to the start of April. The start of the day, April 1st, 2014, here was the Western Conference standings. That the Spurs still at top at 58-16, the Thunder at second at 54-19, the Clippers 3 at 53-22. Those 3 all with playoff spots already clinched. Then you got the Rockets, they're at 49-24, the Blazers at 5 at 49-27, the Warriors at 6 at 46-28, the Suns at 7 at 44-30, the Grizzlies at 8 at 44-30, the Mavericks at 9 at 44-31, and the Wolves still try to fight for a spot at 36-37. Going to April 2nd, this was another big day for the playoffs. The Rockets would lose out to the Raptors 107-103. The Wolves would beat the Grizzlies. The Spurs would blow out the Warriors, and the Clippers beat the Suns in a very tight one. And these were big games as well because with the Grizzlies losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves, but also putting an extra notch on it, the Spurs would beat the Warriors. The Spurs would clinch the Southwest Division title at 59-16. Meanwhile, also with the Warriors losing that game to the Spurs, but also extra stuff on top, the Clippers beat the Suns. The Clippers would clinch the Pacific Division title as well. So looking at it now, the Spurs and Clippers both had division titles. Spurs at 59-16, the Clippers at 54-22, while the Thunder was still trying to clinch their Northwest Division spot as they had a playoff spot already clinched as well, while other teams were trying to clinch the playoffs as well. Going a few days later on April 4th, this was a big day for the Western Conference as well. A lot of games here. The Grizzlies would beat the Nuggets 100-92. The Wolves would beat the Heat in double overtime in a big one. The Rockets would beat the Thunder in a big game 111-107. The Suns beat the Portland Trailblazers 109-93 to keep their season alive. The Warriors destroyed the Kings, and the Mavericks would beat the Lakers. This was big because even though the Thunder lost that day to the Rockets, with the Suns beating the Portland Trailblazers in that game, this means the Thunder would clinch their division title. And now that means all 3 divisions in the Western Conference were clinched by the Suns, the Thunder, and the Clippers, who were the top 3 seed in the West. This also was a big day because with the Rockets winning that game over the Thunder, they would officially clinch a playoff spot, being the 4th team in the West to get to 50 wins. And also what happened that day with the Grizzlies, Suns, and Mavericks all winning games who were the 7-8 seed in the West. This would eliminate the Minnesota Timberwolves from playoff contention. Even though they had a big win over the Miami Heat and got to over 500, they were eliminated from the West, now going down to 10. Going to 2 days later on April 6, 2014, on those Western Conference days, the Clippers would beat the Lakers in the LA rivalry 120-97. The Mavericks would win a close one over the Kings. The Rockets would win in overtime over the Nuggets. The Spurs would blow out the Grizzlies. The Warriors blow out the Jazz. The Suns would beat the Thunder, and the Blazers would beat the Pelicans. This was big because with the Spurs beating the Grizzlies, they now became the first team in the West to get to 60 wins. But also with the Portland Trailblazers defeating the Pelicans, and with the Grizzlies losing that game to the Spurs, the Portland Trailblazers would clinch a playoff spot, becoming the 5th team in the West to clinch and the 5th team in the West to get to 50 wins. Looking at the West, you still have 4 teams left to clinch 3 spots. Warriors, Mavericks, Suns, and Grizzlies, all within about 1.5 to 2 games within each other. They're very, very close. Now we're going to skip a few days. We're going to go to April 11th, 2014. On that day, the Grizzlies would beat the 76ers, the Rockets would lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Thunder would blow out the Pelicans, the Spurs would beat the Suns, the Blazers would beat the Jazz, and the Warriors would beat the Lakers in the series. With the San Antonio Spurs winning that game over the Phoenix Suns, they would now clinch the best record in the Western Conference, number 1 seed in the West at 62-18. The Thunder just being right there with them, but the Spurs would eventually clinch the number 1 seed in the Western Conference at 62-18. Going to the next day of play, this was a big day. The Clippers would beat the Kings 117-101. The Rockets would beat the Pelicans, and the biggest game of the day, the Mavericks and Suns go down to the wire with the Mavericks winning 101-98, and that was a huge game. With the Suns losing that game, a couple things happened. First, it would clinch the Warriors a playoff spot, 49-30, and it would also clinch the Dallas Mavericks a playoff spot of 49-32. Now the 6 and 7 seed were clinched in the Western Conference, and now there was only one spot left up in the West between two teams, the Memphis Grizzlies and the Phoenix Suns. There's only 2 days left in the regular season. On April 13th, the Thunder would lose to the Pacers, the Blazers would beat the Warriors in a big overtime game, and the Grizzlies would beat the Lakers 102-90 for the Grizzlies to get to 48 wins. Now this was big. This was big. The Grizzlies and Suns coming down to the last day of the season would play each other, and it would be winner takes all. The game was in Memphis, and after a very close game, the Grizzlies would outscore the Suns 30-24 in the fourth quarter, and eventually ended up winning 97-91 behind Zach Randolph's 32 points, while Mike Miller put up 21 points at 5 threes off the bench, while Marc Gasol chipped him 18 wins. For the Suns, Markieff Morris was the leading scorer with 21 points off the bench, but it just was not enough, as the Grizzlies would win that game and clinch the playoffs at 49-32. The Suns will be eliminated, and now here was the end season for the Western Conference, an insane Western Conference as well. Looking at these records, I mean, it's crazy. The Spurs are finished as the number 1 seed in the West at 62-20. Yet the Thunder at number 2 at 59-23 behind the MVP Kevin Durant. The Clippers would be third at 57-25. The Rockets at 4 at 54-28. The Blazers at 5 at 54-28 as well, with the Rockets having the tiebreaker. The Warriors at 6 at 51-31. The Grizzlies at 7 at 50-32. The Mavericks at 8 at 49-33. The Suns at 9 at 48-34. The Timberwolves at 10 at 40-42. The Nuggets 11 at 36-46. The Pelicans at 12 at 34-48. The Kings at 13 at 28-54. The Lakers at 14 at 27-55. And the Jazz last in the West at 25-57. But look at this. I mean, you had 7 50-win teams in the Western Conference. 7 50-win teams. A 60-win team. 3 teams at over 55 wins. 7 teams over 50 wins. 9 teams over 500. 10 teams with over 40 wins. And 12 teams over 30 wins. I mean, this was just insane. One of the most stacked, loaded Western Conference you've seen. The Western Conference, all 15 teams combined for 674 wins. Comparing that to the Eastern Conference, who combined for 556 wins. It was just crazy looking at this. I mean, the Western Conference was so stacked. In the East, there's only 2 50-win teams. You have the Pacers and the Heat both have 50 wins. Literally, the 7th seed in the West, the Memphis Grizzlies, could go to the East and be the number 3 seed. The Suns, who missed the playoffs, could go to the West and finish as a top 5 seed. I mean, that was crazy. Also, for reference, the Atlanta Hawks made the playoffs of the Eastern Conference as an 8 seed, and they won 38 games. If they were in the West, they would have been the 11th seed. I mean, it was just insane how deep, how loaded, how entertaining this Western Conference was. I mean, the Phoenix Suns missed the playoffs with 40. Imagine winning 48 games in a season and missing the playoffs. With the Suns winning 48 games and not making the playoffs, they actually are tied for the second best team to never make the playoffs, with the 2008 Warriors, and the 1971 Suns also won 48 games and missed the playoffs. But the team with the most wins to never make the playoffs are actually the Phoenix Suns. In 1972, they won 49 games and missed the playoffs. That's crazy. 3 of the top 4 best teams to never make the playoffs are all Phoenix Suns. Is that bad luck or not? And even they're still in the top 10 on this list. In 2009, they won 46 games and didn't make the playoffs as well. So I guess the Phoenix Suns are just cursed with bad luck of being good but not being able to make it in. Or just curse of being good but just other teams are better, I guess. That's a crazy curse to have. But yeah, this Western Conference was insane. One of the craziest we've seen in the last few years. I mean, and all these teams are good. Like the Spurs, of course, championship contending team. The Thunder, Kevin Durant carried this team to really, really good. The Clippers, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. The Blazers with LaMarcus Aldridge, Dame, Wesley Matthews, Nick Batum. The Rockets with James Harden and Dwight Howard. The Warriors with Steph, Clay, Iggy. The Grizzlies with Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph. The Mavericks with Dirk Nowitzki. The Suns, that were just a fun team that no one really knew about, but they just came out of nowhere and did great things. I mean, even the Minnesota Timberwolves have won 40 games this year. I feel like that doesn't get talked about, but the Timberwolves won 40 games. that season. At this point in time, the Timberwolves, the last time they won 40 games in a year was 2005. And at that point, they didn't make the playoffs that year as well, when they won 44 games. It was the first time in 8 years, or 9 years, that they won 40 games. And it didn't get awarded because they were the 10th seed. This just goes to show you how much talent there was, how much competitiveness there was, and how many great teams are in the West. But also shows kind of how weak the Eastern Conference was at this point. Like, at this point, the Eastern Conference wasn't. It was literally Indiana, Miami. And everyone knew it was going to be Indiana, Miami. And eventually was Indiana, Miami. I actually made a video about that Pacers team. Another Remember When series when the Pacers were supposed to be next up. You can go watch that. But yeah, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you want and you like this video, I could continue this and do one about the 2014, the playoffs for this year in the Western Conference, to see how that played out, because that was entertaining as well. But yeah, if you guys like it, let me know. And yeah, let me know if you guys like this Remember When series. I think it's really, really fun doing it. And I'm going to keep doing it until the season starts, you know. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications, all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. Really upset a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.